The dim light from the chandelier cast long shadows across the spacious mansion, as Lena Miller quietly moved through the grand hallways. She was here for a reason, but it wasn't just the luxury of the Pellarini estate that kept her here. No, it was the young girl she had come to care for, Olivia Pellarini. Olivia, the daughter of the notorious crime lord Victor Pellarini, was sick, battling leukemia. The girl's once vibrant spirit had been dulled by months of treatments, hospital stays, and the slow drain of her health. But for Lena, this wasn't just another job, it was personal. Lena had always been drawn to caring for others. But this job was different. Her heart ached every time she looked at Olivia's fragile frame, her big brown eyes filled with uncertainty. What really kept Lena up at night, though, wasn't just Olivia's illness. It was the secrets she knew were buried deep within the Pellarini family. Lena wasn't just an ordinary caretaker. She had a past. One she hadn't shared with anyone, not even Victor Pellarini. And the more she took care of Olivia, the more she realized how much of a puppet she felt like in the hands of the Pellarini family. She had seen the hidden cameras in the mansion, cameras she'd never been told about but couldn't ignore. They were everywhere, watching every move. Victor Pellarini, the Mafia boss with a hardened exterior, watched over his daughter with an obsessive level of control. He was constantly looking for someone trustworthy to care for Olivia, someone who wouldn't betray them. But what he didn't realize was that he was betraying his own family by hiding the cameras, afraid to trust anyone fully. Lena's first encounter with Victor had been brief but intense. A man of power and wealth, he ruled his family with an iron fist. He was cold, calculating, and strangely distant, yet his eyes softened whenever he looked at Olivia. That vulnerability drew Lena in, even though she knew better than to fall for someone like him. But as days turned into weeks, Lena found herself drawn not just to the sick child she had come to adore, but to Victor as well. There was something about his dark, guarded nature that intrigued her, and something about the way he watched over Olivia made her want to help him in ways she never imagined. Little did Lena know, the time would soon come when she would not just be Olivia's caregiver, but would be asked to take on a far more complex role in the Pellarini family. The story of Lena and Victor Pellarini was just beginning, but it was already fraught with tension, secrets, and a complicated love that neither could resist. The question remained, could Lena survive the web of lies, danger, and betrayal that surrounded the Pellarini family, or would she become another pawn in their dangerous game? Lena walked through the mansion's grand library, carefully adjusting the tray of food in her hands as she approached Olivia's room. It had been a few weeks since she had started caring for the young girl, but every day felt like a test, not just for Olivia's health, but for Lena's patience and emotions. Lena knew how important her role was in this mansion. She wasn't just a nurse or caretaker. She had become part of the Pellarini family's delicate inner circle. But there was always that invisible barrier between them, something she couldn't quite get past. Victor Pellarini, the family patriarch, remained an enigma. While Lena cared for Olivia and spent her days in the mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The subtle clues were everywhere. The tiny blinking lights on certain lamps, the peculiar cameras hidden in plain sight, the locked rooms she had never been allowed to enter. It was a feeling she couldn't ignore, a constant nagging thought that no matter how safe she felt, Victor was always one step ahead. The tension had been building for days. She had seen the way Victor looked at her when their paths crossed, eyes calculating, sharp as a blade. He was always quiet, but his presence was overwhelming. He wasn't just the father of the girl she was tending to, he was a mafia boss, a man who had built his empire on power, fear, and manipulation. It wasn't just about protecting Olivia anymore. Lena had become a piece in Victor's dangerous game. One evening, as Lena sat by Olivia's bedside, the door opened. It was Victor. He didn't knock, he never did. He just entered, like he owned every inch of the house, and took a step closer to Lena. "You're still here," he said, his voice low but not unkind. "I thought you might have gotten tired of the game by now." Lena stood and turned to face him, her heart racing. "What game?" He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "The one where you care for my daughter, and I watch, from the shadows." Lena froze. She knew he was referring to the cameras, the surveillance system he'd installed to keep track of everything, from the servants to the staff. And now it seemed he was adding her to that list. "I'm just doing my job," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, though she could feel the heat of his gaze burning through her. "Your job," Victor repeated, taking a step closer, his presence filling the room. "But you've become important, more than just someone who does her job." His gaze softened for a brief moment, just a flicker of something human. "Olivia needs someone she can trust." Lena swallowed hard. She had thought that she could control her feelings, but the way he was looking at her, it made everything feel so much more complicated. She had seen glimpses of his softer side before, especially when he was with Olivia. But this was different. This was personal. The silence between them stretched for what felt like an eternity before Victor broke it again. "You've been with her long enough. I can't help but notice. You're more than a caregiver, Lena." Lena didn't know what to say. She had never been in a situation like this before. She had always been the one who stayed out of the way, kept her emotions buried deep. But Victor's coldness, his power, and the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide were starting to tear away at the walls she had built around herself. "What do you want from me, Victor?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he took a step closer, so close that Lena could feel the heat of his body. "What do you think I want?" he asked, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. She didn't need to answer. She could feel it, the tension between them, the connection that neither of them could deny, despite the circumstances. But just as the moment seemed to stretch between them, Victor stepped back, his expression hardening again. "I've seen enough," he said. "We'll talk later." Lena watched him leave, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Her pulse raced, her thoughts a whirlwind. She didn't know where this was leading, but one thing was certain: Victor Pellarini wasn't done with her. And the game she had been playing with him was only just beginning. Lena didn't expect the knock at the door that evening. She was in Olivia's room again, sitting by the bed, carefully adjusting the foredrip and checking the medications. It was a routine she'd grown used to over the weeks, though it always brought a mix of sadness and determination. Olivia's condition had fluctuated, but Lena kept pushing forward. She had to, for Olivia, for the job. But tonight felt different. The air in the mansion was heavier, thicker. Lena couldn't place it, but something was off. The knock came again, this time louder, more insistent. Lena stood and walked to the door, her hand hovering for a moment before she opened it. Standing in the doorway was Victor Pellarini, his towering presence filling the hallway. His usual cold expression had been replaced with something more unsettling, a mix of resolve and an underlying tension. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice clipped but not harsh. Lena looked past him into the hallway, half expecting someone else to appear, but it was just him. She nodded, stepping aside to let him enter. He didn't sit. He simply stood, arms crossed, watching her carefully, as if assessing her every move. For a moment, neither spoke. Lena swallowed. "What is it?" Victor took a breath, his gaze intense. "You've been with Olivia for a while now, long enough to see what we're up against." Lena nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. She had seen more than she wanted to. The quiet suffering of Olivia, the lengths Victor went to in order to protect her daughter, even from the people closest to him. Victor continued, his voice lower now. "I've watched you, Lena. Watched how you care for her, how you handle yourself. And I've seen enough to know that you're different." Lena's heart raced. She knew where this conversation was going. She had felt it for days, the way Victor had been looking at her. Not just as a caretaker, but as something more. Something he didn't want to admit. "Different?" Lena echoed, though she could feel the uncertainty creeping into her voice. Victor took a step closer, the space between them closing with a deliberate slowness. His eyes locked on hers, no longer the cold, calculated gaze of the Mafia boss she had come to know, but something else. A mix of admiration and something else she couldn't quite place. "You've become more than just a nurse to Olivia," he said softly. And more than just a caretaker to me. Lena's breath caught. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Victor reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lena's eyes widened as he opened it, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. Lena took a step back, shaking her head. Victor, I know this seems sudden, he interrupted. His voice steady, but there was something more vulnerable in it now. But I need you to understand something. Lena stood frozen, unsure of what to say. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her mind raced, but she could only focus on the ring in front of her. Victor's eyes softened, and he continued, I've spent my entire life building this empire, and I've done things that make me who I am. But you've shown me that there's something more important than all of it. Olivia's safety, yes, but more than that, a future, a family. Lena's chest tightened, her emotions in turmoil. This was impossible. She had never imagined that this moment would come. She had been so focused on Olivia, on her own past and the job she had taken, that she hadn't allowed herself to consider the possibility of a future in this world. I'm not asking for your loyalty just because of the ring, Victor said, stepping closer, his tone more earnest. I'm asking you because I trust you, more than I trust anyone. You've already made a difference here, and I want you to be a part of this family. With me. Lena looked at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was honesty and fear. Fear of losing someone who had come to mean something to him in a way he never expected. I can't, she said softly, the words escaping her lips before she could stop them. Victor's face fell, but he didn't retreat. Why? Because I'm not the right person for you? Lena replied, shaking her head. I came here to help Olivia. That's all. I don't belong in your world. I can't be a part of it. Victor's expression hardened, but his eyes didn't leave hers. You already are. Lena shook her head, her voice breaking as she spoke. I'm sorry, Victor. He took a deep breath and closed the ring box, sliding it back into his pocket. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence was heavy, suffocating. I never expected you to say yes right away, he said quietly. But I needed you to understand. Lena looked down at the floor, unable to meet his gaze. She wanted to say more, to explain herself, but she couldn't. The weight of what had just transpired was too much. As Victor turned to leave, he paused at the door and looked back at her. This isn't over, Lena, he said, his voice softer. Not yet. And with that, he was gone. The days following the proposal were filled with silence and unease. Lena couldn't shake the memory of the ring, the way Victor had looked at her as he offered her a life that seemed far too dangerous for someone like her. She wasn't part of this world. She had never been, and she didn't intend to start now. But Victor's words haunted her. You already are. The truth gnawed at her every time she entered Olivia's room. The child she had come to care for more than anything. Olivia was the reason Lena had come here, the reason she had stayed. But with each passing day, something was changing inside of Lena. Victor's presence in the mansion had grown even more intense since the proposal. He no longer watched from the shadows. He was there, every room, every hallway, his eyes on her. And as much as Lena wanted to resist, she could feel herself being pulled deeper into his world, his empire. On a quiet afternoon, as she helped Olivia with her afternoon tea, the door to the room opened without a knock. Lena knew it was him before she even looked up. Victor stood in the doorway, watching her with that familiar, unreadable gaze. His dark suit made him look even more imposing than usual, but there was something different about the way he looked at her now. Olivia, he said softly, his voice still cold but not as harsh. I need to speak with Lena. Olivia looked up, a faint smile crossing her face. She knew something was happening between them, knew that Victor's presence wasn't just about caring for her anymore. Lena stood and walked toward him, heart pounding in her chest. There was something in the way Victor moved that felt like a threat and a promise all at once. He closed the door behind him with a soft click. What is it, Victor? Lena asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Victor didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring again, this time holding it between his fingers like a reminder of what had passed between them. "I haven't forgotten," he said. "And neither have you." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She had tried to push the memory of his proposal to the back of her mind, tried to focus on Olivia, on the job she had been hired for. But now, it seemed, there was no escaping it. "I've told you already, Victor," she said quietly. "I can't accept this." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, Lena thought he might force the issue. But then, just as quickly, he relaxed. The power dynamic shifted again. "You don't understand," he said, voice softer now. "You're more than just a caregiver to me. More than just someone who can take care of my daughter." Lena shook her head, her heart pounding harder. "I'm not your partner, Victor. I'm not someone who can be part of your world. I've seen what that world does to people. It's dangerous." Victor looked at her, eyes narrowing as if considering something. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I protect what's mine, Lena," he said quietly, his voice low and steady. "And you're mine, whether you admit it or not." The words hit harder than Lena could have expected. She felt trapped, but also strangely comforted by them. There was a pull to him, an undeniable magnetism. But there was also fear. Fear of what would happen if she stayed, if she let herself become part of his world. "Why?" she whispered, the question hanging between them. "Why me?" Victor's eyes softened, and for a moment, Lena saw something else. Something human. Not the Mafia boss. Not the man who controlled everything with an iron fist. Just a man. "Because you've shown me that there's more to life than the fight, than the empire, than all the money and power," he said. "You've made me believe in something more." Lena stood frozen, her mind racing. She had never asked for any of this. She had never wanted to be the one to make him believe in something better. But here she was, caught in a web of feelings she didn't know how to navigate. "I can't be what you want me to be," she said softly. "I'm not part of your world." Victor stepped even closer, his hand gently lifting her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You already are," he repeated, his voice rough with something raw and desperate. "You don't have a choice anymore." Lena pulled away, her chest tight with emotion. "I can't just what?" Victor cut her off, stepping back. "You think you can walk away from this? From me?" "I don't belong here," Lena said, shaking her head. "I can't be what you need." Victor was silent for a long moment, his eyes studying her with an intensity that made Lena's skin prickle. And then, he turned and walked to the door without another word, leaving her standing there, her mind in a whirl. "Think about it," he said over his shoulder before he closed the door. "Because I'm not giving up on you." Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the door he had just closed. She felt trapped, unsure of what to do next. Part of her wanted to run, to leave this mansion, this world, this dangerous man behind. But another part of her, something deep inside, wanted to stay. The days that followed Victor's declaration weighed heavily on Lena's mind. She tried to focus on her duties, caring for Olivia, ensuring her comfort, and maintaining the routine she had settled into. But every time she turned around, there was Victor, his presence like a shadow lurking just beyond her reach. Each encounter with him seemed to stir a new wave of conflict inside her. She had tried to keep the walls up, to remind herself that she didn't belong here, that she was just a caretaker. But with every passing day, those walls felt thinner. He made her feel things she hadn't expected to feel. Not just attraction, but a deeper connection that terrified her. It had been almost a week since the proposal, and still Victor had not pushed her for an answer. But Lena could feel the clock ticking. She knew that eventually he would come to her again. His patience, as it turned out, was just another form of control. Lena walked into the kitchen one morning to find Victor standing by the counter, his back turned to her as he examined the papers in front of him. He didn't look up when she entered, but the tension in the room was palpable. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Good morning, Victor." He didn't reply right away. His silence was always the most telling part of their interactions. Finally, he set the papers down and turned to face her, his eyes dark but not unkind. "Lena, we need to talk." Lena nodded, her stomach tightening. She had known this moment would come. It wasn't about the proposal anymore. It wasn't about the ring or the promises. This was about the truth of what had been building between them. Victor stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You know what I want," he said, his voice low but firm. "But what do you want?" The question caught Lena off guard. What did she want? She had never stopped to think about it. All her life, she had been focused on surviving, on pushing through the pain and the fear. But here, with Victor, it was different. There was something about him that made her question everything she had believed about herself. "I want to be able to walk away," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to go back to my life before all this. Before you." Victor's expression softened for a moment, but then the hard edge returned. "You think you can walk away from me? From this?" He gestured to the mansion, to the life he had built, to everything that had brought them to this point. "I don't want you to walk away, Lena. I want you to stay." Lena shook her head. "I don't belong here, Victor. I'm just a caretaker. I don't fit in your world." "You fit," he replied, his voice quieter now, almost gentle. "Maybe you don't see it, but you do. You've been here long enough. You've seen who I am. I can't let you leave. Not after everything you've done for Olivia. Not after what you've done for me." Lena took a step back, her mind racing. She knew that she couldn't let herself be consumed by him. She couldn't let him pull her into his dangerous world. She had to maintain some sense of control, some way to protect herself. "I can't stay," she said firmly, her voice steady now. "This isn't my fight." Victor's eyes darkened, the familiar anger rising in him. He took a step forward, closing the space between them, his presence overwhelming. "You think you can just walk away from this, from me, without consequences? You think I'll let you go that easily?" Lena felt her breath catch in her throat, but she didn't retreat. "I'm not a part of your empire, Victor. I never was." He was silent for a moment, his gaze intense. Then he spoke, his voice quieter but still full of authority. "I never asked you to be. But you've already become something far more dangerous." Lena took another step back, her chest tightening. "I won't let you control me, Victor." "I'm not controlling you," he replied, his voice soft but firm. "I'm asking you to trust me, to be with me, for once, not because of what I can give you, but because of what we can build together." Lena shook her head, her heart racing. She couldn't let herself be swayed. She had to keep her distance. But even as she thought that, she couldn't ignore the way his words made her feel. She had always been alone, always kept her emotions locked away. But with Victor, everything was different. "You're wrong," she said, trying to steady herself. "This isn't about trust. It's about power. And I don't want to be part of that." Victor stepped back, his expression hardening again. "Then you've already made your choice, haven't you?" Lena looked at him one last time, her heart heavy. "Yes," she whispered. Victor said nothing as she turned and walked away, but his eyes followed her, his gaze full of unspoken promises and threats. The air in the mansion felt thicker after that conversation. Every room Lena entered felt suffocating, as though the walls were closing in on her. She had made her choice, or at least she had told herself that. But the reality of her decision settled over her like a weight she couldn't shake off. She couldn't stop thinking about Victor's words. "You've already become something far more dangerous." The phrase echoed in her mind, replaying over and over again. It was true, though. She had become something in this house, something she never intended to be. Not just a caretaker, but a player in a much larger game. A game she had never asked to be a part of, and yet here she was tangled in its web. Lena had spent her life trying to avoid getting entangled in the lives of others, keeping her distance from everyone. But somehow, the Pellarini family had become her life. Olivia, Victor. She had grown attached to both of them in ways she couldn't explain, and that attachment had made her vulnerable in ways she had never allowed herself to be before. The morning after their confrontation, Lena found herself standing in front of Olivia's bedroom door. The soft sound of the girl's breath through the door reminded her of why she was here. To protect Olivia. To be there for her. That was the only thing that had mattered until now. She opened the door quietly, not wanting to wake Olivia, but to her surprise, the girl was already awake, sitting up in bed, her pale face drawn with exhaustion. "Good morning, Lena," Olivia said, her voice barely a whisper. She smiled weakly as she saw Lena enter. "I had a dream about my dad." Lena sat beside the bed, brushing a strand of hair from Olivia's face. "What about him?" "He was different," Olivia said, her eyes distant. "He looked at me like he cared, like he was scared I wouldn't make it." Lena felt a sharp pang in her chest. She knew how complicated Victor's emotions were, especially when it came to Olivia. He was a mafia boss, hardened by years of betrayal and violence. Yet when it came to his daughter, he was a different man. A man Lena had begun to see in ways she hadn't expected. "He cares about you more than anything in this world," Lena said softly. Olivia nodded, her eyes growing heavy with sleep. "I know, but I don't think he's ever been able to show it." Lena felt the weight of those words, knowing that Olivia had unknowingly spoken the truth about both her father and herself. Victor had never been able to fully show the world who he was. And Lena, too, had kept her true self hidden from him and from everyone. Until now. After checking on Olivia and making sure she was comfortable, Lena left the room, her mind still racing. She needed to get away for a while, to think, to clear her head. The garden outside the mansion was a perfect escape, a place where she could breathe without feeling suffocated by the mansion's walls. Lena walked through the lush garden, her thoughts swirling. The entire situation had become so much more than just a job. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Victor, despite his coldness, despite the walls he kept around himself. He had shown her something she never expected, something she couldn't ignore. Just as she reached the far end of the garden, she heard the soft sound of footsteps behind her. She turned and found herself face to face with Victor. "Lena," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." Lena felt a knot form in her stomach. She hadn't been able to escape him, not really. And now, here he was, pulling her back into his world, whether she was ready or not. "What do you want, Victor?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He stepped closer, his presence overpowering. "I want you to understand that this isn't just about me and you," he said, his eyes searching hers. "It's about the choices we make, the future, and what we build together." Lena's chest tightened as she listened to him. His words, so confident, so commanding, made her feel small in comparison. "I don't know if I can be what you need, Victor," she whispered. "I don't need you to be anything other than what you are," he replied, his voice softening. "I just need you to be with me, with Olivia. You've already become part of this family in ways you don't even realize." Lena shook her head, the weight of his words sinking in. "I didn't come here to be part of your world," she said quietly. "I came here to help Olivia." Victor reached out, his hand resting gently on her arm. "But you've already become part of it," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. "You can't leave this, Lena. You can't walk away from what we've built." Lena felt the gravity of his words, the weight of the decision she had to make. She wanted to walk away, to keep herself safe, but something inside her told her that leaving now would be the hardest thing she'd ever do, and maybe the most dangerous. "I don't know if I can stay," she said. Her voice barely above a whisper. Victor's eyes softened for the briefest moment, but the intensity never left. "Then stay for Olivia," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Stay for the family. We need you. I need you." Lena closed her eyes, the confusion and fear swirling inside her like a storm. She couldn't stay in this world, but she couldn't leave it either. The choices she had made had already tied her to Victor and to Olivia in ways she wasn't sure she was ready for. But one thing was certain. She couldn't walk away now. The mansion felt colder after that conversation, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the heaviness of the decision that had been made. Lena had spent the past few days avoiding Victor, lost in the routine of caring for Olivia, but the silence between them was unbearable. She knew she couldn't keep running from the truth. She had made her choice, but the consequences were only beginning to unfold. Lena knew that Victor wasn't a man to be ignored. Every time she thought she could escape him, he found a way back into her life. It wasn't just the subtle presence of his surveillance. It was his unwavering dominance, the way he controlled everything, even the emotions she hadn't yet allowed herself to face. It was late one evening when Lena heard a knock on her door. She had just finished her shift with Olivia and had planned to spend the rest of the night alone, but she knew the knock was inevitable. It was always him. She opened the door to find Victor standing there, his face unreadable, the familiar coldness in his eyes softened by something else, something she couldn't quite place. "Lena," he said, his voice steady but with a faint trace of something deeper. "We need to talk." Lena's heart skipped a beat, but she stepped aside to let him in. "What is it, Victor?" He closed the door behind him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the room was thick, and Lena could feel it pressing against her chest. "I've been thinking about what you said," Victor started, his gaze fixed on her. "About not being part of my world." Lena didn't reply, unsure of how to respond. The truth was, she still didn't know how to process everything she had felt over the past few days. The pull between her desire to protect Olivia and the growing bond she had with Victor was overwhelming, and she had no idea how to navigate the mess she found herself in. Victor took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You think you can walk away from this? From me?" Lena's breath caught in her throat. "I never said I was walking away, Victor," she said softly, trying to steady herself. "But I can't be what you want me to be. I can't be the woman you think I am." He stepped closer still, his presence almost suffocating. "I don't want you to be anyone else, Lena. I just want you to stay." Lena shook her head. "But you don't understand. I'm not like you, Victor. I don't belong in this world. I've seen what it does to people, and I can't let it change me. Not like it's changed you." Victor reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek gently. The touch was unexpected, and it made Lena's breath hitch. She hadn't realized how much she had craved this kind of connection, this fleeting softness that existed behind Victor's cold, calculated exterior. "You've seen what I've done to keep Olivia safe," Victor said quietly, his voice raw with something deeper than usual. "You've seen the lengths I've gone to, but I do it because I have to, because I've built this empire, and nothing will take her from me." Lena's heart ached. She understood that. She had seen Victor's love for Olivia firsthand, his obsession with keeping her safe. But it didn't change the reality of the life he led, the life he dragged her into without her consent. "I don't want to be a part of that, Victor," Lena whispered. "I don't want to be used in your games." He took her hands, his grip firm but gentle. "You're not a pawn in this, Lena. You never have been. You're something else. You're someone I trust more than anyone." Lena looked down at their intertwined hands. She could feel his pulse, his warmth, and for a moment it almost felt real. But she knew better than to get lost in the feeling. This was Victor Pellarini, cold, dangerous, calculating. "I don't trust myself here," Lena confessed, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what I'm becoming." Victor's eyes softened, a flash of something like regret crossing his features. "I never wanted to pull you into this world," he said quietly. "I never wanted to make you a part of the violence, the lies, the things I've done. But you've seen the truth now, and there's no going back." Lena pulled her hands away, stepping back. "I don't belong here," she said again, but this time, her voice lacked the conviction it once had. She wasn't sure if she was telling him the truth or lying to herself. Victor didn't move. He simply stood there, staring at her with an unreadable expression, before finally speaking. "Then prove it." Lena blinked. "What? Prove it?" Victor repeated. "Leave. Walk out that door and leave this world behind. If you think you can, then go. But if you stay, Lena, then you stay in my world. For good." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Lena felt as though she might suffocate under the weight of the decision. But something inside her, something raw and desperate, told her that if she left now, she would never have the chance to make things right. If she stayed, there would be no turning back. She would be trapped just like him. But in some strange way, that was what she wanted. To be in control. To not be afraid. "I'm not afraid of you, Victor," she said, her voice steady now. "But I can't be part of this life. Not like this." Victor didn't say another word. He simply turned and walked out of the room, leaving Lena alone to face the consequences of her own decision. As the door clicked shut behind him, Lena felt the weight of his absence settle in. But for the first time since she had entered this house, she felt the smallest sliver of freedom. Lena had never felt more trapped. Days passed in a blur after that night, and despite the distance she had tried to maintain from Victor, she couldn't shake the sense that she was being pulled back in. She thought she had made her choice, but the truth was more complicated than she could have ever imagined. She was in his world now, whether she wanted to be or not. Olivia was the only thing that kept her grounded, the only reason Lena had stayed as long as she had. She had watched the young girl fight for her life, watched her family's empire come crashing down piece by piece. But the longer she stayed, the more she realized that her own life was beginning to unravel, too. That afternoon, as Lena sat with Olivia, reading her favorite book aloud, the air shifted. It was a subtle change at first, just the sound of hurried footsteps outside the door. But when the door swung open, Lena froze. Victor stood there, his usual imposing presence filling the room. But this time there was something different about him. His eyes were hard, his jaw clenched tight. His entire demeanor had shifted, and Lena knew immediately that something had changed. "Lena," he said, his voice clipped. "We need to talk." Lena stood, heart pounding. She hadn't expected him to come to her like this, not with Olivia in the room. But there was no escaping him now. "I'm here with Olivia," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This won't take long," Victor replied, his gaze shifting to Olivia for a moment before locking back onto Lena. "I need you to understand something." Lena didn't respond. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever he was about to say. The tension in the room was unbearable. "I've been patient," Victor continued, "but patience has its limits." Lena's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Victor stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "I'm asking for loyalty, not just from Olivia, but from you too. You've been given a place in this family, in my world. But that comes at a cost. A cost I'm afraid you're not fully aware of." Lena's breath caught in her throat. "Victor, I've never—" He cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't understand the weight of what you've stepped into. I've done everything to protect you, to protect her." He nodded toward Olivia, who was still sitting quietly in her bed, watching the exchange with wide eyes. "But there are rules in this world. Rules that can't be ignored." Lena felt a chill run down her spine. The walls were closing in again. This wasn't about Olivia anymore. This was about Victor and the world he had built, the world she had become a part of without realizing it. "What do you want me to do, Victor?" Lena asked, her voice barely a whisper. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, his expectations heavy in the air. Victor didn't speak at first. He simply walked toward the door, then turned to face her, his eyes piercing. "You have a choice. You either stay loyal, stay in this world, or you walk away. But know this. If you walk away, it's not just your life you're risking. It's everyone's." The words hit her like a slap. She had already known the stakes, but hearing them from Victor's lips, in his cold, calculated tone, made them real. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the people she had come to care for, the people she had unwittingly tied herself to. Lena's heart raced. She wanted to scream, to tell him that she couldn't do this anymore. But the words wouldn't come. She couldn't leave Olivia. She couldn't leave this world. Not now. Not when she had seen the reality of it all. Victor's expression softened slightly. "You've already made your choice, whether you realize it or not. You're in this with me, Lena, and there's no going back." Lena felt the cold truth settle into her bones. She had known, deep down, that this moment was coming. She had known that the choice would never truly be hers. She was bound to this world, bound to Victor whether she wanted to be or not. As Victor turned and walked out of the room, Lena stood there, frozen. Her gaze shifted to Olivia, who had been silently watching the entire exchange. The young girl's eyes were filled with fear and uncertainty. Lena walked over to her, sitting by her side and gently brushing the girl's hair back. "Don't worry, Olivia," she said softly, though her voice betrayed her own fear. "Everything will be okay." But deep down, Lena knew nothing would ever be the same again. She was no longer just a caretaker. She was part of the Pellarini world, and that world didn't allow for mistakes. Lena had never felt more like a prisoner. Victor's words haunted her. She was in his world now, whether she liked it or not. There was no escaping him, no running away from the life he had drawn her into. The Pellarini name, the power, the control, it was all around her. And though she had been given a choice to walk away, she knew deep down that there was no way out. Not for her. Not for Olivia. That night, as she sat alone in her room, the weight of the decision she had made began to settle over her. She couldn't escape it. Her heart ached, knowing that she had given up the life she had once known in exchange for something that felt both suffocating and all-consuming. She heard footsteps outside her door, heavy, purposeful. A knock came, and before she could even respond, the door swung open. Victor stepped in, his presence filling the room. He had a look on his face that Lena had come to recognize all too well: determination, mixed with something darker, something colder. He had always been hard to read, but tonight, there was an undeniable tension in the air. Felt like a storm was brewing. "What is it?" Lena asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Victor didn't immediately answer. Instead, he closed the door behind him and walked toward her, his footsteps echoing in the silence. When he reached her, he stopped, his eyes locking onto hers. "I need you to understand something, Lena," he said quietly, his tone serious. "I didn't just bring you into this world for Olivia's sake." Lena's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" Victor leaned closer, his voice lower now. "I brought you here because I saw something in you, something I haven't found in anyone else. You're stronger than you think, Lena. But in this world, strength has its price." Lena stood up, taking a step back. "What do you mean by that?" Victor reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to her, and she hesitated before taking it. The envelope was heavy, and as she opened it, her heart sank. Inside was a photograph, a grainy image of Lena's old life, her past that she had tried so hard to leave behind, her family, her home, the place where everything had gone wrong. The photo was old, but it was unmistakable. Her mother, her father, her brother who had disappeared years ago, the family she had buried along with her memories. "This was a mistake," Lena said softly, staring at the photo, feeling her past come rushing back. Victor didn't answer right away. Instead, he let her look at the photograph for a moment before speaking. "Your brother is alive, Lena. He's been working against me." Lena's eyes snapped up to meet his. "What are you talking about?" "He's been selling information to my enemies," Victor said, his voice cold and steady. "I thought I had taken care of all loose ends, but it seems I missed one." Lena's chest tightened. Her brother alive? The man who had vanished without a trace, the one she had thought was lost to her forever. He was connected to Victor's enemies? "How do you know it's him?" Lena whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I have eyes everywhere," Victor replied. "I knew something wasn't right when the information started leaking. The trail led back to him. And now I need you to help me fix it." Lena shook her head, her hands trembling as she held the photograph. "I can't be a part of this. I can't." Victor's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice, Lena. You're already in this. And now you're part of the solution, whether you like it or not." She took a step back, holding up the photograph like a shield. "I don't want to be involved in this, Victor. You can't force me." "I don't want to force you," he said, his voice low and dark. "But you've already made your choice. Your loyalty is to Olivia, And to me, that's the only thing that matters now. Lena felt the walls closing in. Her brother, the family she thought she had lost. She didn't know who she could trust anymore. And as much as she wanted to turn her back on this world, she knew it was too late. You need to help me, Victor continued. You need to find him and bring him back. Lena's thoughts raced. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know if she could trust Victor anymore. He had pulled her into this world with promises of safety, but it had all come crashing down around her. And now, her family, the one thing she thought she had left behind, was tangled in the very empire she had tried to escape. I'll do it, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But only for Olivia, not for you. Victor's eyes softened for a brief moment, and Lena wondered if he had ever truly understood what he was asking of her. But she didn't have time for questions. She had made her decision. She would find her brother. She would bring him back. But she would never be the same. The mansion felt more like a prison with each passing day. Lena could feel the weight of the decision she had made hanging over her. She had agreed to help Victor, to track down her brother, and yet every step felt like it was pulling her deeper into the world she had tried to avoid. Victor's world wasn't just dangerous, it was suffocating. She could feel it in the air, in the way every conversation, every glance, seemed to carry a hidden meaning. There were no simple answers here. Everything came with a price. Lena sat in her room, staring at the photograph of her family. She had spent years trying to forget them, burying her memories along with the pain of what had happened. And now, her brother's name was back in her life, linked to the very people she had feared. She had asked herself over and over why he had done it. Why had he chosen to betray her, to become part of the network that had been Victor's enemies? The betrayal stung deeper than she had anticipated. But more than that, it was the thought of him being alive, the one person she had thought was lost to her forever. The very idea was almost too much to bear. But she had no choice now. The moment she had agreed to help Victor, everything had changed. She walked to the window, staring out at the vast estate. The mansion was beautiful, its opulence almost blinding, but it felt like a gilded cage. She was stuck, unable to escape, and worse, she was losing herself. Just as she turned away from the window, the door to her room opened. It was Victor. Lena's pulse quickened at the sight of him. He was standing in the doorway, as composed and cold as ever, but there was something different in his eyes, a glimmer of something she couldn't quite place. "You're ready then?" Victor asked, his voice steady. Lena swallowed, trying to push down the anxiety rising in her chest. "Ready for what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "To find him," Victor replied, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "We need to move quickly. Time is running out." Lena nodded, her fingers gripping the edge of the windowsill. "How do you know he'll even show up? He hasn't been in contact with you. He's been hiding for years." Victor stepped closer, his presence filling the room. "Because you're his sister," he said, his voice almost gentle now, the coldness receding. "You'll be the one to bring him out of hiding. He won't be able to resist you." Lena turned away from him, shaking her head. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, the uncertainty in her voice betraying the calm exterior she had worked so hard to maintain. Victor's eyes softened, just for a moment. "You've been stronger than you realize, Lena. You've already made it through the worst. Don't think I haven't noticed." Lena's heart twisted at his words. He had seen more of her than she had ever wanted him to. She had tried so hard to keep her emotions in check, to remain distant from him, but it was impossible. Victor had a way of getting under her skin, of making her feel things she couldn't control. She turned back to him, her gaze searching his face for any hint of the man she was growing to care for, or maybe it was the man she was afraid of. "I'm not sure I can do this anymore," Lena admitted, her voice cracking. "I'm not sure I can keep playing this game." Victor was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. Then, without a word, he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His hand reached out, gently cupping her face, his thumb tracing her cheek in a gesture so tender it left Lena breathless. I never asked you to play the game, Lena, he said softly. But you're already in it, and you're already part of this family, no matter what you think. Lena closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. The weight of everything she had lost, the life she had once known, the innocence she had tried so hard to protect, pressed down on her. She opened her eyes to meet his, and for the first time, she saw something in his gaze that wasn't just control. It was something else, something almost vulnerable. I can't promise you that it will be easy, Victor said, his voice low and intense. But I can promise you that I will protect you. Olivia, this family. You're not alone in this. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him, to believe that he wasn't just manipulating her, that the bond between them wasn't just a strategy. But she had seen enough of Victor's world to know that trust didn't come easily here. I need to know you're with me, he said, his voice soft but commanding. We'll find your brother, and we'll deal with him, but you need to make a choice. Will you stand by me? Lena stood there, her heart torn in two. She had always prided herself on her independence, on her ability to make her own choices. But with Victor, those choices were becoming harder to make. I'm not sure if I can, she whispered, her voice trembling. Victor's expression darkened, but there was no anger in it. Instead, it was understanding. A deep understanding that scared Lena even more than anything else. You already are, he said quietly, whether you realize it or not. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and unease. Lena tried to focus on her duties, tried to stay in her role as Olivia's caretaker, but everything felt different now. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in on her, and every time she crossed paths with Victor, the weight of their unspoken emotions hung between them. She had made her choice. She had agreed to help Victor find her brother, but she had never expected how deeply that choice would bind her to him. She was no longer just a bystander in his world. She was part of it now, whether she wanted to be or not. Every moment felt like a test of her willpower. Could she keep her distance from him? Could she keep her emotions in check? Or would she eventually lose herself completely to the man she was beginning to care for? The night before the search for her brother was to begin, Lena stood by the window of her room, staring out at the darkened mansion grounds. She had never been one to run from danger, but this was different. The stakes had grown higher, and she knew that once they began searching for her brother, there would be no going back. A soft knock on her door broke her from her thoughts. Lena turned, and there stood Victor, his face unreadable, his eyes shadowed by the weight of whatever decision lay before him. I've been waiting for you, he said quietly, his voice softer than usual. Lena nodded but didn't move. She couldn't bring herself to speak, her emotions still tangled from everything that had happened in the past few days. Victor stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. We have to move fast. Once we start looking for your brother, there's no turning back. We'll be exposed. I don't want you to get hurt. Lena's heart raced as his words sank in. I've already made the decision, she said quietly, her voice steady. I'm with you. We're doing this. Victor's gaze softened for a moment, but then he looked away, his jaw tightening. I don't want to drag you deeper into this, but you're already in it, whether you realize it or not. Lena felt a pang in her chest. She had known that from the beginning. She had been pulled into this world against her will, but now she couldn't imagine leaving it. There was no way out. Not anymore. Victor, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of what we're becoming. Victor took a step toward her, his eyes searching hers. I'm not trying to control you, Lena. I never was. I don't know how to do this without you. Her breath caught in her throat. For the first time, she saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the cracks in the armor he had built around himself. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it made her heart ache. But at the same time, Lena couldn't ignore the danger he brought with him. The empire he had built was built on lies, on violence, on control. And no matter how much she cared for him, she knew she could never fully be a part of it. I need to know something, Victor continued, his voice low. Are you with me? Not just for Olivia, but for me? Can I trust you to stand by me when this gets dangerous? Lena hesitated. The truth was, she had already crossed that line. She couldn't pretend she was just doing this for Olivia anymore. She had become too entangled in Victor's world, and no matter how hard she tried to resist, she couldn't pull away. I'm with you, she said softly. But I need you to understand, this isn't easy for me. I don't belong here. I don't belong in this world. Victor stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers. You belong here as much as I do. You're part of this, whether you want to be or not. Lena's pulse quickened as his fingers brushed against hers, and for a moment, she thought he might pull her into his arms. But instead, he paused, his gaze intense. I'm not asking you to be someone else, he said quietly. I'm asking you to be with me, to stay, to fight. Lena closed her eyes, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never imagined her life would take such a turn. She had come here to help Olivia, to escape the demons of her past. But now, she found herself standing at the edge of a dangerous precipice. And there was no turning back. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Victor watching her intently, waiting for her to make the choice. And with that, she realized the truth. She wasn't just fighting for Olivia anymore. She was fighting for herself. Fighting to hold on to whatever piece of her soul hadn't yet been claimed by this world. I'm ready, she whispered. Let's do this. Victor's lips curled into a faint smile. He reached out and took her hand, pulling her toward him. Then we moved forward together. Lena didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a strange sense of peace. She had chosen her path, and she was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant walking deeper into the darkness of Victor Pellerini's world. The days following Lena's decision to stay in Victor's world were a blur of uncertainty and danger. The search for her brother had begun, and with it came a new wave of anxiety that Lena could not shake. Every step they took, every move they made, felt like it was pulling them closer to the edge. Victor was relentless. As always, he was in control, orchestrating every move, making sure nothing went wrong. He was the one calling the shots. But Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn deeper into a life she would never escape. They had tracked her brother to an old safe house on the outskirts of the city. The place was abandoned, empty, except for the shadows of the past that seemed to linger in every corner. It was the kind of place Lena had tried to forget, a place that reminded her of everything she had left behind. Victor had insisted that they go alone. He didn't trust anyone else, and Lena knew that he saw this as personal. He didn't just want to find her brother. He wanted to make sure that this betrayal, this connection to his enemies, was dealt with once and for all. As they entered the safe house, Lena could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The air was thick with tension. Victor was already ahead of her, scanning the room with sharp eyes. He moved like a predator, confident and calculating. But there was something else in his demeanor. Something darker. Lena could feel it too. The walls were closing in. They were both walking a fine line, and the consequences of this mission could change everything. Victor turned to her as they reached the back of the house, his gaze intense. We need to be careful. Your brother isn't just hiding from me. He's hiding from everyone. Lena nodded, but she didn't speak. She was too focused on the sound of her own heartbeat, pounding in her chest. Every step she took seemed to echo in the silence. They reached the basement door. Victor didn't hesitate. He kicked it open, and the darkness swallowed them whole. Lena followed him down the stairs, the flickering light from their flashlights casting long shadows on the walls. As they reached the bottom, Victor paused, holding up his hand to signal her to stop. She saw him tense. Lena's breath caught in her throat. What is it? Victor didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the room, his body rigid. Then, without warning, he moved forward, pulling her with him. There was a rustling noise, a quick movement in the corner. Lena's heart stopped. And then, out of the darkness, he emerged. Her brother. Lena froze, her mind racing. It was him. The man she had spent years trying to forget. The man who had disappeared without a trace. He was standing there, looking at her with a cold, detached expression. "Lena," he said, his voice low and guarded. Victor stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "You've been a ghost long enough," he said to Lena's brother. "And now you're going to answer for what you've done." Lena's brother didn't flinch. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his gaze flicking between her and Victor. "You were always a pawn. Always." The words hit her like a slap. She didn't want to believe them. She couldn't. "No," Lena whispered, her voice cracking. "No, that's not true." Her brother took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You think you've made the right choice by staying with him? By being with Victor? You're just another tool in his game, Lena. And when he's done with you, he'll throw you away just like everyone else." Victor moved quickly, stepping in between them, his face hard. "That's enough," he said. "You've already betrayed me. Don't make me finish this." Lena's heart pounded. She could feel the world spinning out of control. Her brother, Victor, everything she had thought she knew about loyalty, trust, and family, everything was shattering in front of her. Her brother sneered, taking a step back. "You really think he cares about you, Lena? You're nothing to him. You're just a piece to move around in his game." Lena shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "Stop," she said, her voice desperate. "I don't want to hear this." But her brother didn't stop. He just smirked, knowing that he had struck a nerve. "You're nothing to him, Lena, and you always will be." Victor's hand shot out, grabbing Lena's brother by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "That's enough," he said, his voice ice cold. "I don't need you to tell her what she already knows." Lena stood frozen, watching the two men in front of her. Victor, the man she had come to depend on, the man who had drawn her into his world, and her brother, the one who had abandoned her, the one who had chosen a life of betrayal and secrecy. Her mind raced. Could she trust Victor? Could she trust herself? But before she could think any more, the sound of footsteps came from the stairs, heavy and quick. The door at the top of the basement opened, and a group of men appeared, guns raised, their eyes cold and menacing. Victor's expression changed in an instant, hardening, calculating. "We're not done here," he said, "but we'll finish this later." The men moved quickly, surrounding them. Lena's heart hammered in her chest. This was it. This was what Victor's world really was. Betrayal, power, control. And Lena? She was trapped in the middle of it all. The chaos in the basement didn't stop when the gunmen appeared. It only intensified. Lena could feel the cold weight of the gunfire surrounding her, the tightness of her chest, the suffocating air in the room. She had been part of this world for too long now, but it was becoming harder to deny the cost. Victor, ever the calculating figure, had already shifted gears. His stance had gone from tense to measured, his movements quick and decisive. The men who had appeared weren't just his goons. They were his family, members of his inner circle, the people who could make or break everything he had built. And in this moment, Lena knew how fragile that empire truly was. Lena's brother, still pinned against the wall by Victor, shot her one last look, his expression twisted with anger and betrayal. "You think this is protection?" he spat, blood seeping from his lip where Victor had struck him. "You're just another pawn in his game, Lena. Just like me." Victor's grip tightened, and he slammed her brother's head into the wall one more time, a warning. "Enough," Victor said coldly. "You've already said your piece. Now you'll listen." Lena didn't know what to feel. She had always assumed she was the one being played. But now, standing here in this cold, unforgiving basement, with Victor's empire closing in around her, she felt like she had no choice but to keep going forward. But the question remained, what was she really choosing? Loyalty? Survival? Or something darker? The men in the room stood in place, waiting for the next move. Lena felt her legs grow weak beneath her, the weight of the situation almost too much to bear. She had thought she was ready for this, but the truth was, she wasn't. She had underestimated the depth of Victor's world and the extent of what he was willing to do to protect it. "Lena," Victor said, his voice snapping her back to reality. "We're not done here. Take him upstairs." The command was clear. The men moved quickly, grabbing her brother and pulling him roughly toward the stairs. He struggled, but they overpowered him with ease. Lena felt a pang of guilt. She had hoped, deep down, that she could save him. But the man who had disappeared all those years ago was no longer the brother she remembered. He was part of a bigger game, a dangerous game. Victor stepped closer to her, his eyes intense. "This isn't about family, Lena," he said, his voice low and firm. "This is about power, and power requires sacrifice. We both know that now." Lena looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any trace of doubt, of humanity. But there was nothing. He was who he was, a man who ruled with iron fists and calculated precision. "You knew I would do whatever it took to protect Olivia," Victor continued, his gaze unwavering. "And you knew the cost. But you never fully understood what that cost would be. Not until now." Lena swallowed hard, her throat dry. "What are you asking of me, Victor?" she whispered, her voice breaking. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out and touched her cheek gently, his fingers cold against her skin. It was a moment of tenderness, but Lena knew it wasn't real. It wasn't a promise of love or affection. It was a reminder that she was already too deep into this world to turn back. "I'm not asking you to choose me, Lena," Victor said, his voice softer now. "I'm asking you to choose us." The words hit harder than she expected. To choose us. To choose the family, the empire, everything that had already entangled her in a world she never asked to be part of. Lena pulled away from him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I never wanted this," she whispered. "I never wanted any of this." Victor's gaze didn't waver. "You're here now," he said simply, "and you've already made your choice." The realization hit her like a wave. She had been making choices every day, whether she realized it or not. Every step had led her further into Victor's world. Every decision, every action had pushed her deeper into the darkness. She couldn't pretend anymore. She had already chosen, and there was no going back. As the minutes passed, Lena felt the weight of her choices press down on her. She was no longer the woman she had once been, the woman who had tried to escape her past, the woman who had hoped for a quiet life. She was becoming something else now, a part of Victor's world, a cog in the machine that controlled everything. But the hardest part wasn't the power or the danger. It was the feeling of being trapped, of knowing that she had no way out no matter what she did. The door opened, and the sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Lena turned, and there was Victor, watching her with those piercing eyes, as if he could see right through her. "We're leaving," he said simply. Lena nodded, a sense of dread settling over her. "Where are we going?" "To finish this," he replied, his voice cold. "Once and for all." Lena stood in the cold night air, the mansion looming behind her like a cage she could never escape. It was the dead of night, and everything was eerily silent, too silent. Victor's men had already taken care of the business inside. Her brother had been dealt with, and the situation was, in Victor's mind, under control. But Lena could feel it. The calm before the storm. The silence was just a prelude to something far worse. They had left the safe house hours ago, the adrenaline still heavy in their veins. But as they drove back to the mansion, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that everything was slipping through her fingers. Victor had made his move. He had secured everything he needed. But at what cost? The world he had built, the empire he controlled, was fragile. Every choice he made, every move he took, led them closer to the edge of something unthinkable. Lena felt like she was walking that same edge, one misstep away from falling into the abyss. She had chosen this life. She had chosen to stay. But now she wasn't sure she could keep going. Victor walked up beside her, his presence as imposing as ever. There was no comfort in his proximity, only the crushing weight of the world he had dragged her into. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an undercurrent of something more, something darker. Lena looked at him, her heart racing. She had always trusted her instincts, and every part of her told her that they were headed towards something irreversible. "Ready for what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Victor's gaze locked onto hers, piercing, knowing. "To finish what we started. To take control." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She knew what that meant. She had been part of this world long enough to understand the stakes. She had seen the way Victor moved, the way he manipulated everyone around him to ensure his power. But there was something in his eyes tonight, something almost desperate, something human. And for the first time, Lena wondered if he felt the weight of everything as she did. "Do you ever wonder if this is worth it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "All of it, the blood, the lies, the power?" Victor's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. "It's all worth it," he said simply. "To protect what matters." Lena took a step back, shaking her head. "Is that what you believe? Or is it just the only thing that keeps you going?" The silence between them stretched. Victor didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, Lena wondered if he was reconsidering, if he was beginning to see the truth of what she was saying. But then he spoke, his voice cold and controlled once more. "We don't have time for doubt, Lena," he said, his eyes hardening. "We've come too far." Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she looked at him. She had seen the way he controlled everything, his empire, his enemies, even her. But what about his heart? What about the parts of him that were real? "Victor, she started. But before she could finish, the sound of footsteps approached. A man, one of Victor's closest associates, appeared in the shadows. His face was grim, and his expression told Lena everything she needed to know. "It's done," the man said. "The last of them is taken care of. No more loose ends." Victor nodded, but there was no relief in his face, only cold satisfaction. "Good," he said, his gaze shifting back to Lena. "Now we finish what we started." Lena's heart dropped. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. She had been pulled into this world. There was no walking away from it now. But as she stood there, facing Victor, facing the dark truth of what they had become, Lena realized something. This was no longer about surviving. It wasn't even about loyalty anymore. It was about power. And she had been a part of it from the very beginning. "You have a choice, too, you know," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Victor looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" Lena took a deep breath. She had to say it. "You can choose to walk away from this. Choose to leave the violence, the control, the empire you've built." Victor's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You think I can walk away from this?" he asked, his voice dark. "You think I can just turn my back on everything I've built? Everything I've fought for?" Lena shook her head slowly. "I'm not talking about leaving the empire. I'm talking about leaving you." The words hung in the air between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lena could see the flicker of emotion behind Victor's eyes. But it was gone just as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold, calculating man she had come to know. "You're too far gone, Lena," Victor said, his voice low. "We both are." And with that, he turned away, walking toward the exit of the mansion. Lena stood there, watching him go, her heart heavy with the weight of her own decisions. She had made her choice. She had stayed. But as she watched Victor disappear into the shadows, she realized something else, and no matter how hard she tried, there was no going back now. The night had fallen heavier than Lena expected. As she stood at the window of her room, the vast estate before her seemed so still, yet everything within her felt like it was on the verge of imploding. She had made her choice. There was no turning back now. But as she looked out into the distance, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking a path that would lead to nothing but destruction. Victor had been distant since their last conversation. His actions had only reinforced the cold reality she had come to accept. He was a man who sought control at all costs, and the empire he had built around himself was based on a foundation of power, betrayal, and sacrifice. And she had become part of it. Lena had spent the last few days trying to convince herself that she wasn't just another pawn in his game. But deep down, she knew she was. The moment she had agreed to help him take down her brother, her life had been sealed. The door opened behind her, and without turning, she knew who it was. Victor's presence was unmistakable, like a force that could either destroy everything or pull you under, depending on his mood. His footsteps were deliberate, steady. She didn't turn to face him immediately. She needed the distance to gather her thoughts, to find her composure. "Lena!" Victor's voice broke through the silence, low and commanding. "We're leaving tonight." The words sent a chill down her spine. "Where?" she asked, not turning around. "We have business to finish," Victor replied. "I've given you a choice, but now there's no more room for hesitation. You'll come with me." Lena felt her pulse quicken. Business. That's what he called it. But she knew what it really meant. Another mission. Another piece in his empire's game. She had seen the signs. Victor wasn't done, not by a long shot. He wasn't finished with his enemies. And now, with her brother out of the way, it seemed like everything was about to escalate. "What are you planning to do?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the fear she felt. Victor was silent for a moment. She could feel his gaze on her, like he was weighing her every word. Then, slowly, he spoke. "You don't need to worry about the details," he said, stepping closer. His voice was smooth, reassuring. "Just come with me, and you'll see that you're not just an accessory. You're integral to the future I'm building." Lena clenched her fists. Integral. That was what he saw her as. Another asset. Another tool to help him build his empire. "I never asked for any of this," she said quietly, finally turning to face him. "I never asked to be a part of your world, Victor. But now I see what this really is." Victor stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His eyes were unwavering. "It's not about asking anymore, Lena. It's about accepting what is. You've made your choice." Lena shook her head, stepping back slightly. "I didn't know what I was choosing." Victor's gaze softened ever so slightly, but the cold edge in his voice never wavered. "You've seen what happens when you stand in my way. I don't want to do this, but I will. For you, for Olivia, for the future." The last part of his sentence hung in the air like a threat. The future. She had heard him say those words before, and each time, they felt like a promise and a warning all in one. The future he was building would come at a cost, and she would have to decide if she was willing to pay it. Lena looked down, trying to steady her breath. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I've seen this before. The violence, the manipulation, the control. I thought I could change it. I thought I could be a part of something different. But now all I see is more of the same. And I don't know if I can live with it anymore." Victor's hand reached for hers, his grip firm but gentle. "I don't want you to change it, Lena," he said softly. "I want you by my side, as we build it together. You've become part of something bigger than you ever realized. And I won't let you go now." Lena's heart ached as she looked at him. She had never imagined that she would become so entangled in his world, that she would fall this far into the darkness. But she was already there, and as much as she wanted to run, she knew there was no escaping it. "I'm scared," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm scared of what I've become, of what we've become." Victor's grip tightened, pulling her closer. "We're in this together, Lena, and I won't let you go. You're stronger than you think. And together we can do anything." Lena felt the weight of his words, but it didn't bring the comfort she had hoped for. She wasn't sure if she could keep going, if she could live with the choices she had made. But one thing was certain. There was no going back. The door opened again, and one of Victor's men entered. His expression was grim. "It's time," the man said, his voice serious. Victor turned to Lena, his eyes intense. "This is it. The final step. Stay with me, Lena, and together we'll take control of everything." Lena didn't answer right away. She looked at Victor, the man who had dragged her into this life, and for the first time, she didn't see just the Mafia boss. She saw the man who had made her feel like she was a part of something powerful. But was that power worth the cost? She didn't know. But as they walked out of the room, together, she realized that she didn't have a choice anymore. The city at night was a different beast. Lena watched the lights blur past the tinted windows as Victor's convoy cut through empty streets. No sirens, no traffic, just speed and silence. The kind of silence that only existed before violence. She sat beside Victor in the back seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. He hadn't spoken since they left the mansion. His focus was absolute. Eyes forward, jaw set, every muscle coiled like a weapon ready to fire. "Where are we going?" Lena finally asked. Victor didn't look at her. "An old warehouse near the docks. One of my rivals thinks I'm weak after what happened with your brother." Her chest tightened. "And you're going to prove him wrong?" "Yes." The simplicity of his answer scared her more than anything else. When the cars came to a stop, Lena felt it before she saw it. The tension humming in the air, sharp and electric. The warehouse loomed ahead, massive and abandoned, its windows dark like empty eyes watching them approach. Victor opened the door and stepped out. He turned back to her. "Stay close to me, no matter what happens." Lena nodded, forcing herself to breathe. Inside, the warehouse smelled of oil and rust. Shadows stretched across the concrete floor as Victor's men spread out, weapons drawn. Every sound echoed, their footsteps, the click of a safety being released, Lena's own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then a voice cut through the darkness. "You finally showed up, Pellarini." A man stepped forward from the shadows, flanked by armed guards. His smile was sharp, cruel. "I thought you'd send someone else to do your dirty work." Victor didn't flinch. "I don't outsource betrayal." The tension snapped. Gunfire exploded through the space. Lena screamed as Victor grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a stack of crates. The sound was deafening. Shouts, shots, bodies hitting the ground. "Stay down!" Victor shouted over the chaos. Lena pressed herself against the cold concrete, trembling. This wasn't a story anymore. This wasn't something happening around her. This was real. And people were dying. A man rushed toward their position. Before Lena could react, Victor stepped out and fired, clean, precise. The man dropped. She stared at Victor, her breath caught in her throat. There was no hesitation in him, no doubt. "You okay?" he asked quickly, already scanning for the next threat. I think so," she said, her voice shaking. Another gunshot rang out, closer this time. One of Victor's men went down. Blood spread across the floor, dark and fast. Something inside Lena broke. She didn't know when she stood up. She didn't remember deciding to move. All she knew was that she grabbed a fallen weapon and turned just as another man lunged toward them. She raised the gun. Time slowed. Victor shouted her name. The man froze when he saw her aim, just long enough. The gun went off. The recoil jolted through her body as the man collapsed. Silence crashed down around her, broken only by distant footsteps as the remaining attackers fled. Lena dropped the weapon. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Her ears rang. Her chest burned with each breath. Victor was in front of her in seconds, gripping her shoulders. "Look at me," he said sharply. "Lena, look at me." She met his eyes, tears spilling freely now. "I didn't want to. I didn't mean to." "You saved my life," he said, his voice rough. "You did what you had to do." She shook her head. "This isn't who I am." Victor's expression softened. But there was something else there now. Respect. Recognition. "It is now," he said quietly. The warehouse fell silent as his men regrouped. The threat was gone. The cost was not. Victor pulled Lena into his arms, holding her tightly as her body shook. For the first time, she didn't push him away. She had crossed a line. There was no pretending anymore. No illusion of innocence. She wasn't just standing beside Victor now. She had become part of the war. The ride back was silent. No one spoke. Not Victor. Not the men in the front. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint ringing still trapped in Lena's ears. Her hands were clean now, wiped down carefully by one of Victor's men. but she could still feel it. The weight of the gun, the recoil, the moment everything changed. She stared out the window, watching the city pass by like a stranger's life. When the convoy finally stopped at the mansion, Lena didn't move. Victor noticed immediately. "Give us a minute," he said to his men. The doors closed. Silence wrapped around them again. "Lena," Victor said, more gently now. "We're home." She shook her head slowly. "That isn't home anymore." Victor didn't argue. Inside the mansion, the lights were low. Too calm. Too normal. Felt wrong after what had happened. Lena walked past the familiar halls as if she'd never been there before, every step heavy with memory. Victor followed her into her room and closed the door. She finally turned to face him. "I shot someone," she said flatly. Victor nodded. "Yes. I didn't freeze," she continued, her voice hollow. "I didn't run. I didn't even think." "That's instinct," he replied. "Survival." "No," Lena said, shaking her head. "That's change." She sank onto the edge of the bed, pressing her hands to her face. "I used to believe there was a line, that as long as I didn't cross it, I could stay myself." Victor watched her carefully. "And now, there is no line anymore," she whispered. "I crossed it." Victor stepped closer but stopped just short of touching her. This wasn't the moment for control. He understood that. "You didn't become weak tonight," he said quietly. "You became powerful." Lena looked up at him, eyes burning. "Power isn't freedom. It's a cage. You should know that better than anyone." The words hit him harder than she expected. For the first time, Victor didn't have an answer ready. He exhaled slowly. "I never wanted this for you. But you prepared me for it," she said. "You watched me, tested me, pushed me closer every day until there was nowhere else to go." Victor didn't deny it. "You're right," he said finally. "I saw what you were capable of before you did. That doesn't make it okay." "No," he agreed. "But it makes it real." Silence stretched between them. Then Lena spoke again, quieter now. "I'm scared of how easy it was." Victor's gaze darkened. "Not with fear, with recognition." "That feeling never goes away," he said. "You either let it destroy you, or you learn to control it." She stood abruptly. "I don't want to be like you." Victor stepped aside, giving her space. "Then don't be. Be better." She laughed bitterly. "You say that like this world allows better." He met her eyes, unflinching. "This world doesn't allow anything. You take it." Lena felt the truth of it settle in her bones. She walked to the window, staring out into the darkness. Somewhere out there was the girl she used to be. Quiet, careful, untouched. She wasn't coming back. Behind her, Victor spoke again, lower, different. "Tonight changed how my enemies see you," he said, "and how my allies will." Lena turned slowly. "What does that mean?" "It means you're no longer invisible," he replied. "You're no longer protected by ignorance." She swallowed. "And how do you see me now?" Victor hesitated. That alone was terrifying. "You're not someone I need to protect anymore," he said at last. "You're someone I need beside me." The words landed heavier than any gunshot. Lena closed her eyes. That was the moment she understood the truth. She hadn't just survived Victor's world. She had earned her place in it. And that meant the danger was only beginning. By morning, the story had already changed. Not the truth, never the truth, but the narrative. Lena learned that lesson quickly. She sat at the long dining table, untouched coffee growing cold in front of her, as Victor's advisors spoke in low, urgent tones. Names she didn't know, cities she had never visited, numbers that represented lives, territory, leverage. And her name, she caught it more than once. She was there. She fired the shot. They won't underestimate her now. Lena's spine stiffened. Victor noticed. He always did. "That's enough," he said calmly, and the room fell silent. "Leave us." The men hesitated, then obeyed. When the doors closed, Lena finally spoke. "They're talking about me like I'm currency." Victor leaned back in his chair. "Because you are now." She flinched. You said I'd have a choice. You still do, he replied evenly. But choices change when the world starts watching. He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen were surveillance photos. Blurry, distant, but unmistakable. Victor. The warehouse. The aftermath. Someone leaked this, she said. Yes, Victor answered. And not accidentally. Her chest tightened. Your rivals. And some allies, he added. Fear creates ambition. Lena pushed the tablet away. So what happens now? Victor studied her for a long moment. Not assessing. Not measuring. Acknowledging. Now, he said. You become official. The word echoed in her head. Official. As what? She asked. Victor stood and walked toward her. As someone under my name. My protection. My authority. Her pulse spiked. That sounds like ownership. It's visibility, he corrected. Without it, you're a target with no shield. She stood as well, meeting his gaze. And with it, you're still a target, he said honestly. Just a harder one to touch. Silence fell between them. Lena exhaled slowly. This isn't about safety. This is about control. Victor didn't deny it. Control keeps you alive. She laughed quietly, humorless. That's what everyone in your world says right before they lose themselves. Victor stepped closer. You didn't lose yourself last night. You found something. Something I didn't want. And yet, he said softly, you didn't run. That was the truth that hurt the most. Before she could respond, Victor's phone rang. He answered without looking away from her. Yes. A pause. His expression darkened. How many? Another pause. Lock the perimeter. Double security. No exceptions. He ended the call. Lena's stomach dropped. What happened? They sent a message, Victor said. A small explosion at one of my southern operations. No casualties. A warning. They're testing you, he continued. Testing whether you're real or just a rumor. Lena felt a cold clarity settle over her. So this doesn't end, she said. Victor's voice was steady. It's just beginning. She nodded slowly. Then I need my own rules. That surprised him. I won't be hidden, she said. I won't be paraded. And I won't be used as leverage against Olivia. His jaw tightened. Agreed. And I don't take orders blindly, Lena added. Not from you. Not from anyone. Victor searched her face, then smiled. Not amused. Proud. Good, he said. Then they'll fear you faster. She turned toward the window, looking out over the estate. Somewhere beyond those gates, people were already reacting to what she'd done. To who she'd become. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was being noticed. And in Victor's world, that was the most dangerous thing of all. The storm hit before dawn. Lena had barely slept, her mind racing with the weight of the previous days. The mansion felt like a trap, every corner now filled with eyes. Her name was no longer just a whisper. It was a brand, target, and the world was closing in. Victor's men were already moving when she stepped into the hallway. They had mobilized quickly, their movements sharp and coordinated. It was clear. This wasn't a simple attack. This was a message. As she entered the war room, Victor was already at the table, looking over blueprints of the estate. His usual calm replaced with a hard edge. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed with focus. Everything's on high alert, one of his men reported. We've got movement on all fronts. Victor nodded, barely acknowledging the man. His eyes were locked on the map in front of him, the silent calculation running behind every decision. Lena approached the table. What's happening? Her voice was steady, but her heart raced in her chest. Victor looked up at her, his gaze sharp. They're making their move. The same enemies who've been testing us, they think you're the weak link. They'll strike where they think it hurts most. She frowned. What do you mean? You, Victor said bluntly. You're the symbol. They want to break what we've built. If they can hurt you, they'll make me react. And that's what they want, chaos. Lena's blood ran cold. She hadn't realized how visible she'd become. To the world outside these walls, she wasn't just an ally to Victor anymore. She was his weakness. "You're already in danger," Victor continued, his voice softer now but still filled with the weight of truth. "But I'm not losing you, Lena. Not now." Her heart pounded. The thought of being used against him made her sick. She had tried so hard to be her own person in this world, his world. But now, it was clear that everything she did, every decision she made, was tied to him in ways she couldn't escape. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "I didn't ask to be part of your games. But now they're pulling me into it, Victor." He didn't deny it. "And now you've got to play. With me. Or they'll bury us both." Lena turned away, pacing the room. "What do you expect me to do? Hide? Stay out of the way and let you fight this war for me?" Victor's eyes darkened, and for the first time, Lena saw a flicker of something else in him. Not just the Mafia boss. Not just the man who controlled everything. But a man who feared losing her. "No," he said firmly. "You fight. With me. Because they're already coming for us both." The room fell into a tense silence. Lena couldn't stop the weight of his words from pressing down on her. She had made her decision. She was in this for better or worse. But standing here now, facing the truth of it all, she wasn't sure if it was the right one. A burst of gunfire echoed from outside, followed by a loud crash. It was closer than they'd anticipated. "They're here," one of Victor's men said, rushing into the room. "They breached the south gate." Victor's gaze snapped to Lena, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He was used to controlling everything. This unpredictability was not something he could calculate. "We move out," he said sharply, his voice cutting through the tension. "Now." The adrenaline kicked in immediately. Victor was already on the move, grabbing his jacket and pulling out his gun. He moved with the ease of someone who had lived this life, who had fought these wars. Lena followed him. Her heart pounded, her mind running through every possible scenario. This wasn't just a fight. This was a turning point. "Victor," she said as they moved through the halls, "if they want to break us, then let's break them first." He didn't respond immediately, but the corner of his mouth twitched, like he was about to smile. But there was no humor in it. There was only cold, calculated intent. "That's the plan," he said. "But we do it my way." They reached the war room where the men had already gathered. The map of the estate was lit up on the wall, showing multiple locations where enemies were closing in. Lena joined them, standing at Victor's side. She was no longer just standing by. She was part of the plan. Her name was out there, and now she had to fight for it. Fight for her place. One of Victor's men turned to them. "They're splitting their forces. Some are headed straight for the east wing. The rest are coming through the main gates." Victor turned to Lena, his eyes fierce. "You'll take the east wing. Secure the exits and hold the line until we can regroup." Lena didn't hesitate. "On it." She took a gun from one of the men and followed them down the hall toward the east wing. She could hear the sounds of distant gunfire now, louder, closer. Her heart raced, but there was no fear. Not anymore. When they reached the hallway outside the east wing, Lena took a deep breath. She was ready. This wasn't the woman she used to be. This wasn't the woman who had hesitated the first time she'd pulled the trigger. She was Lena Pellarini now, and she would make them fear her. The east wing was chaos. Lena moved swiftly through the narrow halls, her senses on high alert. Gunfire echoed from the main gates, loud and harsh. The attack was far more coordinated than they had anticipated. She could feel the weight of the decision she'd made, the gun heavy in her hand, but there was no time for doubt now. She rounded a corner and spotted one of Victor's men, crouched down by the door to the hallway ahead. He signaled for her to stop. Lena crouched beside him, scanning the area. "What's the situation?" "They've breached the front," the man said, his voice tight. "More of them are coming through the back. We've got about 5 minutes before they get through this wing." Lena nodded. "We need to make sure they don't get past here. We hold the line." The man looked uncertain. "We don't have enough people to hold them back for long." Lena's eyes flashed. Then we make them think we do. She grabbed his radio and spoke into it. All units, engage immediately. Let them think we're more than we are. Buy us time. Victor's voice crackled through the radio. What's the status? We're holding the East Wing, Lena said, her voice steady. But it's a limited defense. We need backup and we need it now. There was a pause before Victor's voice returned, firm and decisive. You do what you have to. I'll handle the rest. Lena's heart raced. This was it. She was no longer just following orders. She was giving them. The first wave of attackers came around the corner, moving cautiously, expecting resistance. They weren't ready for the ambush. Lena and the man opened fire. 2 fell immediately, their bodies slamming against the walls. But there were more than they could handle alone. Lena's mind raced as she fired, moving instinctively. She was aware of the danger, but the adrenaline coursing through her veins drowned out the fear. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting to win. And then, she heard it. A loud crash from the other end of the hallway. The sound of the main doors being breached. A new wave of attackers was coming. Lena's instincts took over. She reached for another grenade from her vest and tossed it into the hallway. The explosion rocked the walls, sending a shockwave through the building. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. When the smoke cleared, the attackers were disoriented, but they didn't retreat. They were professionals. They would press on. Reload and hold the line. Lena barked at the remaining men. She could see the fear in their eyes, but she wouldn't let it show on hers. She wasn't just a part of Victor's empire anymore. She was the empire's defender. Suddenly, a voice shouted from behind her. Lena, we've got movement on the south side. Lena spun around, catching sight of more armed figures approaching through the hallway. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the nearest weapon and moved to intercept them. She had no backup now. It was just her. As she rounded the corner, a man appeared in her sights. His face was masked, but the look in his eyes was unmistakable. He wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to kill. Lena fired first. He dropped to the ground, but his comrades surged forward, weapons raised. Lena ducked behind a pillar, reloading as fast as she could. Each second felt like an eternity. She could hear their footsteps closing in. And then, something shifted. A sharp, cold clarity washed over her. There was no room for hesitation, no room for fear. She had already crossed that line. She was a part of this world, and this world demanded strength. She emerged from her cover, firing with precision, taking down 2 of the attackers before they even realized where she was. The third hesitated, and that was enough. She aimed for his chest and pulled the trigger. The man crumpled to the floor. Lena stood over him, panting, her heart hammering in her chest. Her hands were slick with sweat and blood, but her mind was clear. She had done it. She had survived, and she had taken control. As the last of the attackers retreated, Lena collapsed against the wall, her body shaking with the aftershock of the battle. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the weight of what she had just done. The noise in her ears slowly quieted, and the pounding in her chest began to ease. A voice echoed down the hall. Lena! It was Victor. She stood up, pushing the exhaustion aside, and walked toward him. He was standing in the doorway, his posture stiff, his eyes cold as usual. But when he saw her, something shifted. Is it done? He asked, his voice calm but heavy with expectation. Lena nodded, wiping the blood from her hands. It's done. Victor took a step closer, his eyes scanning her face, lingering on the bloodstains. For a moment, neither of them spoke. And then, finally, Victor's gaze softened, just for a second. You've proven your place, he said quietly. No one can question your loyalty anymore. Lena looked at him, her heart still racing, and realized the truth. The war wasn't just about enemies. It wasn't just about survival. It was about identity. She wasn't just someone caught in the storm anymore. She was the storm. And now the world would know her name.